The candle flame trembled as Casper Davenport lifted the leather-bound book from the table, his hands unsteady not from nerves, but from the careful calculation required to judge the distance in the dim light. The orc woman sitting in the wooden chair beside the narrow bed watched him with eyes that saw nothing, her head tilted slightly as though listening to the rustle of pages. And when she spoke, her voice carried none of the roughness he had expected from someone who lived alone on the border of the village. "My cousin said you read well," Hessa Harrow said, folding her hands in her lap. "She said your voice does not stumble over the words. I do my best." Casper settled into the chair she had positioned for him, noting how precisely it had been placed, angled toward the bed but not too close, respectful of space. The cottage was small but orderly, everything in its place with the kind of exactness that spoke of necessity rather than preference. He opened the book to the first page, squinting slightly to bring the letters into focus. The script was large, thankfully, printed rather than handwritten. "This is the one you wanted, the merchant's daughter and the sea." "Yes." "My cousin read the first 3 chapters before she left for the summer markets. I have been waiting 2 weeks to know what happens next." He began to read, his voice filling the quiet room with words about ships and storms and a girl who refused to marry the man her father had chosen. Hessa listened without moving, her green-skinned hands still folded, her small tusks just visible when she breathed through slightly parted lips. She wore a simple dress of brown wool, mended at the sleeves, and her dark hair was braided back from her pointed ears. She looked younger than he had expected, perhaps 25, though with orcs it was hard to tell. Casper read for an hour, pausing only to turn pages, his left eye compensating for the blur that had crept into his right. When he reached the end of chapter 6, he glanced up and saw that Hessa's breathing had deepened, her head tilted against the back of the chair. He closed the book quietly and stood, but her voice stopped him before he reached the door. "Thank you," she said, not opening her eyes. "Same time tomorrow, if you wish." "I do. I will pay you at the end of the week, as we agreed." He let himself out into the summer evening, walking the half-mile back to the village center where he kept his room above the general store. The coin she offered was fair, better than fair really, considering he only read for an hour each night. But the work suited him. No one staring at his face in the lamplight, no one noticing when he had to hold a document at an odd angle to make out the words. Just his voice and a woman who could not see the ruin the acid spill had made of his right eye and the scarring along that side of his face. The next evening he returned, and the evening after that. Hessa always sat in the same chair, always folded her hands in the same way, always listened with the same complete attention. He learned that she lived on a small pension from the army, having served as a scout before an explosion had stolen her sight 3 years ago. She mentioned it matter-of-factly while asking him to describe the illustration on page 47. "I cannot see the pictures anymore," she said. "They were always my favorite part." So he described them, haltingly at first, unsure of his ability to capture images in words. But she listened patiently, and gradually he found the rhythm of it. The merchant's daughter had red hair that fell to her waist. The sea captain had a scar across his knuckles. The ship's sails were patched with squares of canvas in 3 different shades of white. "You see details," Hessa said one night, a week into their arrangement. "Most people only see the large things." "I have to look carefully," Casper said, then wished he had not, but she only nodded as though that made perfect sense. The book about the merchant's daughter ended on a night when rain drummed against the cottage roof. Casper read the final lines, his voice softening as the captain and the girl stood on the deck of the ship, watching the sun rise over an island they would make their home. He closed the book and set it on the table, expecting Hessa to thank him and let him leave as she always did. Instead, she said, "Will you stay a while longer?" He froze, his hand still on the book's cover. "Stay, just to talk, if you are not in a hurry." She turned her head toward him, though her eyes focused on a point somewhere past his shoulder. "I have another book, but I am not ready to begin it yet. I would like the last one to sit with me for a time." Casper sat back down slowly. The candle on the table had burned low, and the room was full of shadows that made it easier to see, paradoxically, because his damaged eye did better in dimness. "It was a good ending," he said. "Yes, I worried she would go back to her father, that she would choose duty. Would you have?" Hessa smiled, a small expression that softened her face. "No, but I left home at 16 to join the army, so I am not the one to ask about duty to family. You did your duty to the kingdom instead. I did what I wanted and called it duty. There is a difference." She stood and moved to the small kitchen area, her hands trailing along the edge of the table, then the back of a chair, finding her way with a grace that came from practice. "Would you like tea? I have mint." "Yes, thank you." He watched as she filled a kettle from a covered bucket, hung it over the fire, and reached unerringly for 2 cups on a shelf. She moved through the space as though she could see it, and perhaps in a way she could. Her world was measured in steps and reach, in textures under her fingertips and sounds that told her where things were. "How long have you been a scribe?" she asked, settling back into her chair with the tea steaming between her hands. 15 years. Since I was 18. You were trained young. My father was a scholar in the capital. He sent me to the university when I was 16. Casper wrapped his hands around his own cup, feeling the warmth seep into his palms. "I was going to follow him into the archives, but things changed." "What changed them?" He should have expected the question. She did not press, just waited, sipping her tea. The rain continued its steady rhythm overhead. "An accident in one of the laboratories," he said finally. "I was copying a text for one of the alchemists and a bottle broke. The acid splashed. I was lucky it did not kill me. But it took your eye. Most of the sight in it, yes, and my face is not what it was." He touched the scarring along his right cheek without meaning to, a habit he had never broken. "The university said I could stay, but I would not be allowed in the archives anymore. Too much risk, so I left. That must have been hard. It was 10 years ago. I have made peace with it." The lie sat bitter on his tongue, but he had said it so many times it almost felt true. He changed the subject before she could ask more. "Why did you want a reader? Your cousin could have finished the book when she returns. She reads too fast. She wants to get through the story and tell me the ending so she can move on to other things." Hessa set down her cup, her fingers tracing its rim. "You read as though you are savoring the words, as though they matter. They do matter." "Yes," she smiled again. "That is why I hired you." They talked until the candle guttered and Casper had to admit he could barely see the room anymore. Hessa walked him to the door, her hand light on his elbow, and bid him good night with the same courtesy she always showed. But something had shifted. The formality between them had cracked, just slightly, letting in the possibility of something warmer. The next night he brought a new book, a collection of folk tales he had copied out himself years ago when his sight had still been sharp. The letters were large and clear, easy for him to read even now. Hessa listened to 3 of the tales, then asked him to describe the cover of the book, the color of the binding, the way his handwriting looked on the page. "I miss seeing words," she said quietly. "I used to read to myself before bed every night. Now I have to wait for someone else to give them to me." "I miss reading silently too," Casper said, and then stopped, surprised at himself. Hessa tilted her head. "Your injury affects your reading." He had not meant to say anything. But the words had slipped out, and there seemed little point in pulling them back now. The damage to my eye makes it hard to focus. I can read, but only slowly and only in good light with large print. Reading aloud is easier. I can follow the lines with my finger and take my time. So we are both robbed of the pleasure of a private page. Yes. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That makes you a better reader, I think. You understand what I have lost." He did not know what to say to that. So he read another tale and another until her breathing slowed and her head drooped. This time when he stood to leave, she stirred and said, "Stay a moment." "I thought you were asleep." "Nearly." She straightened, pushing her braid back over her shoulder. "Will you come earlier tomorrow?" "I would like to talk before the reading." "If you wish." "I do." So he came an hour earlier the next evening and found her kneading bread dough at the kitchen table. She gestured for him to sit and continued working, her strong hands pressing and folding the dough with the same precision she brought to everything. They talked about small things: the weather, the price of grain, a dispute in the village over a fence line. She asked him about his work as a scribe, and he told her about the letters he wrote for villagers, the contracts he drew up, the records he kept for the mayor. "It is steady work," he said, "but it grows harder. Your sight is worsening." It was not a question. Casper looked down at his hands. "Yes. Slowly, but yes, I can still manage for now, but I do not know how much longer." "What will you do when you cannot?" "I do not know." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. He had not said it aloud to anyone, had barely let himself think it. "Find other work, I suppose. Something that does not require reading." Hessa shaped the dough into a round and set it in a bowl to rise. She wiped her hands on a cloth, then sat down across from him. "I asked for a reader because I wanted to hear stories again, yes, but also because I wanted company. Someone who would not pity me for my blindness." "Why would anyone pity you? You manage perfectly well." "Because people see what I cannot do, not what I can. You are the first person in a long time who has treated me as though I am simply a woman who likes books." She folded the cloth carefully, creasing it into a neat square. "And I think perhaps you understand that because you hide your own injury from others." Casper felt his throat tighten. "I do not hide it. You come here at dusk when the light is low. You chose to read to me rather than work that would require you to read documents in daylight. You keep your right side turned away when you talk to people. I can hear it in the direction of your voice." Her tone was gentle, without judgment. "I cannot see you, Casper, but I notice what others might miss." He should have felt exposed. Instead, he felt something close to relief. "Yes," he said quietly, "I hide it." "Why?" "Because I am afraid that if people know, they will stop trusting me with their work. A scribe who cannot see properly is no use to anyone. A scout who cannot see at all is no use to the army either. Yet here I am." Hessa reached across the table, her hand searching until it found his. Her grip was warm and firm. "We are both learning to live with what we have lost. That is not something to hide." Her hand in his felt like an anchor. He turned his palm up, lacing his fingers through hers. "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple, but it is possible." She squeezed his hand once, then let go, standing to check the bread dough. "Stay for supper, I have stew." He did, and the meal was plain but good, eaten at the small table with the window open to the evening air. Afterward he read to her for an hour, a tale about a woman who tamed a dragon with nothing but patience and song. Hessa fell asleep before the end, and Casper sat for a long moment, watching the way the candlelight played across her face, the softness of her expression in sleep. He came earlier again the next night, and the night after that. Their conversations before the reading stretched longer, covering everything from childhood memories to favorite foods to the best way to mend a leaking roof. Hessa spoke about her years in the army, the friends she had made and lost, the day the explosion had filled her world with white light, and then nothing. Casper spoke about his father, who had stopped writing to him after he left the university, ashamed of a son who had failed. "He did not fail," Hessa said firmly. "He survived. Survival is not achievement. It is the first achievement. Everything else builds on it." They began to touch more often, casual brushes of hands when she passed him his tea, her fingers lingering on his wrist when she wanted his attention. He found himself describing things to her unprompted. The way the sunset turned the clouds orange, the pattern of beetles on the garden wall, the exact shade of green in her eyes that shifted from moss to jade depending on the light. She listened to it all with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way he had not experienced in years. One night, 3 weeks into their arrangement, Casper arrived to find Hessa standing in the garden, her hands cupped around something. He approached quietly, and she turned her head at the sound of his footsteps. "There is a bird here," she said. "I think it is injured. It keeps fluttering, but it cannot fly." He looked at the small sparrow in her hands, its wing bent at an odd angle. "The wing is broken. Can it be mended?" "I do not know. Perhaps with a splint. Will you help me?" They spent the next hour fashioning a tiny splint from a twig and strips of cloth, Hessa holding the bird steady while Casper wrapped the wing. Her hands were steadier than his, even though she could not see what she was doing. When they finished, she settled the bird in a box lined with grass and set it on the kitchen shelf. "It may not live," Casper said, "but we tried. That matters." He looked at her in the dim light, the curve of her jaw, the way her braid had come slightly loose. "You are a kind person, Hessa Harrow, and you are a gentle one, Casper Davenport." She turned toward him, and though her eyes did not meet his, he felt the weight of her attention. "I am glad you came to read to me. So am I." That night he read to her about a prince who gave up his throne to become a gardener, and when he finished, she did not ask him to stay. But she walked him to the door with her hand on his arm, and when she bid him good night, her fingers trailed down to his hand and squeezed once before letting go. He walked back to the village in a daze, his heart beating faster than it should. He had not let himself think about what was growing between them, had not wanted to name it for fear of breaking it. But it was there, undeniable now, a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. The bird lived, to his surprise. After 5 days, Hessa unwrapped the splint and released it in the garden, and they stood together listening to the flutter of wings as it flew away. She reached for his hand without speaking, and he gave it willingly. "I have a question," she said. "And you may say no. Ask. Will you tell me what you look like? I know you have scars, you said as much, but I do not know the rest. Your height, your build, the color of your hair. I have been trying to imagine you, and I find I want to know the truth." Casper's first instinct was to refuse. But she had asked so plainly, without guile or pity, and he found he could not deny her. "I am just over 6 feet tall," he said slowly. "Brown hair, a bit too long because I keep forgetting to cut it. Brown eyes, or eye, since the right one is mostly useless. I am thin. My mother always said I needed to eat more. The scars run from my right temple down to my jaw, raised and shiny where the skin healed poorly." "May I?" Hessa lifted her hand, and he understood what she was asking. "Yes." She stepped closer, raising both hands to his face. Her fingers traced his features with a delicacy that made his breath catch, following the line of his brow, the bridge of his nose, the shape of his mouth. When she reached the scarred side of his face, she did not hesitate, her touch just as gentle as she mapped the uneven texture of the damaged skin. She took her time, learning him the way she learned everything, through patience and attention. "You have a kind face," she said finally. "I can feel it in the way you hold yourself, in the softness of your mouth. The scars do not change that. Most people find them unsettling. Most people are fools. She let her hands drop, but she stayed close, near enough that he could smell the mint from the tea she had been drinking. You have been kind to me, Casper. You have read to me without judgment, spoken to me as an equal, helped me with an injured bird. That is what I know of you. The rest is just flesh. He wanted to kiss her. The want was so sudden and fierce it left him dizzy. But he held himself still, unsure if she would welcome it, unwilling to assume. She smiled, a small quirk of her lips that told him she knew exactly what he was thinking. You are standing very close, she said. I can move. I did not ask you to. Hessa. Her name felt like a prayer. Yes. I have been thinking about you, more than I should, perhaps. Why should you not? Because I am a half-blind scribe with no prospects, and you are a woman who deserves better. She laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. I am a blind orc living on a tiny pension, a woman most humans cross the street to avoid. I think we are well matched in our unsuitability. That is not what I meant. I know what you meant, and you are wrong. She reached up, her fingers finding his jaw and tilting his head down. May I kiss you? Yes. The word came out rough. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, a soft exploration that sent heat flooding through his veins. He cupped her face in his hands, careful of her tusks, and kissed her back with all the longing he had been holding inside for weeks. She made a small sound of pleasure and leaned into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hessa rested her forehead against his chest. I have wanted to do that for days, she said. Why did you not? I was not sure you wanted the same. You are so careful with me, I could not tell if it was kindness or desire. It is both. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. I did not think you would want me. Then we are both fools. She pulled back enough to look up at him, her face serious. I know this will not be easy. People will talk, they will judge, but I find I do not care if you do not. I do not care. And it was true. Let them talk. He had spent 10 years hiding, afraid of what people would see when they looked at him. But Hessa saw nothing, and yet she knew him better than anyone had in years. They stood in the garden until the sun set, talking in low voices about what this meant, what they wanted. Hessa admitted she had never courted anyone seriously, her years in the army too busy, her blindness making her wary of anyone who might see her as a burden. Casper admitted the same, his injury and his shame keeping him isolated. They were two people who had learned to expect little from life, and now found themselves holding something precious and fragile between them. We will go slowly, Hessa said. We will see where this leads. Yes. But slowly was not in their nature, it seemed. Casper found himself at her cottage every day, sometimes twice a day, helping with repairs to the fence, weeding the garden, sitting at the table while she cooked, and he read her recipes from a book she had been given. He read to her every evening, but now she sat beside him instead of across, her hand in his, her head sometimes resting on his shoulder. When the reading was done, they talked or simply sat in comfortable silence, and more often than not he kissed her good night before leaving, long, slow kisses that left him aching for more. The village noticed, of course. People began to whisper when he passed, glances sliding away when he looked up. The mayor's wife stopped him one morning outside the general store, her face pinched with concern. Mr. Davenport, I feel I must speak to you about the company you have been keeping. Casper set down the sack of flour he had been loading onto his shoulder. What company would that be? The orc woman on the edge of the village. People are saying you have been spending a great deal of time at her cottage. People are correct. Miss Harrow hired me to read to her. Yes, well. The mayor's wife pursed her lips. That may have been appropriate at first, but it has gone on for quite some time now. People are beginning to talk. Let them talk. Mr. Davenport, I say this for your own good. That woman is not suitable company for a man of your standing. She is an orc, and a blind one at that. What can possibly come of such an association? Casper felt anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. Miss Harrow is a veteran who served this kingdom honorably. She is intelligent, capable, and kinder than most people I have met in this village. If you have a problem with my association with her, you are welcome to find another scribe. The mayor's wife stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. Well, she said finally, I never thought you would be the type to consort with orcs. Then you did not know me at all. He picked up his flower and walked away, his hands shaking with the effort to stay calm. When he reached Hessa's cottage, he told her what had happened, and she listened with a face that showed nothing. It will only get worse, she said quietly, if we continue this. You want to stop? No. But I need to know you are prepared for what will come. People have accepted me because I keep to myself and cause no trouble. But if you stand with me openly, they will turn on both of us. Casper took her hands in his. Let them. I am tired of hiding, Hessa. Tired of living small because I am afraid of what people will think. You have shown me that there is another way. What way? To live without shame. To accept what I am and find joy anyway. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. You have given me that gift. I will not throw it away because the mayor's wife disapproves. Hessa's eyes shone with tears that did not fall. You are braver than you think, Casper Davenport. I learned it from you, but bravery did not make the coming weeks easier. 2 of Casper's regular clients stopped hiring him, murmuring excuses about needing less work done. A group of young men shouted insults at Hessa when she walked to the well for water. And Casper, who had been with her, shouted back and earned a shove that sent him sprawling. Hessa pulled him up, her face white with fury, and marched them both home. You will not fight them, she said, her voice shaking. I will not have you hurt because of me, and I will not stand by while they insult you. Then we will both stay here and avoid the village until people find something else to gossip about. It was a bitter compromise, but it held. Casper moved his scribe work to Hessa's cottage, such as it was, and they lived in careful isolation for nearly a month. Hessa showed him how she navigated the world without sight, teaching him tricks for keeping his workspace organized, so he could find things by touch rather than by searching with his failing eyes. She taught him to judge distance by sound, to move through a room by memory, to cook by smell and texture rather than by sight alone. These are things I learned the hard way, she said one afternoon as he fumbled with a pot of stew. But you do not have to learn them alone. He set down the spoon and turned to her. I am losing my sight, he said. Not all of it, perhaps, but enough. In a year or 2 I will not be able to work as a scribe anymore. I know. It terrifies me. I know that too. She came to him, her hands finding his shoulders. When I first went blind, I thought my life was over. I could not imagine how I would survive, what purpose I would have. But I learned that sight is only one way of understanding the world. There are others. How did you bear it, one day at a time, and with help when I would accept it? She pulled him close, her cheek against his chest. You do not have to bear this alone either, Casper. I am here. He held her tightly, breathing in the scent of mint and bread that always clung to her. What did I do to deserve you? You read to me with patience and care. You saw past what I could not do to what I could. You made me feel human again. She pulled back enough to find his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. That is no small thing. They were still standing that way when someone knocked on the door. Hessa tensed, and Casper went to answer it, wary of more trouble. But the man on the doorstep was unfamiliar, middle-aged and travel-worn, his clothes marking him as a merchant. I am looking for Mr. Casper Davenport, the man said. I was told he lives here. I am Davenport. What do you need? My name is Taryn Wells. I run a merchant house 2 villages north. I heard you do scribe work, and I have a proposition for you." Casper glanced back at Hessa, who had come to stand behind him. "What kind of proposition?" "I need someone to take dictation and keep records for my house. The work is steady, but it does not require much reading, mostly listening and writing down what you hear. I would pay better than what you make here, and I do not care what company you keep." Taryn Wells looked past him to Hessa, his expression neutral. "I served with orcs in the border wars. They saved my life more than once. Anyone who judges them does not deserve my business." Casper felt hope flare in his chest. "You are offering me work, if you want it. My current scribe is retiring, and I need someone reliable. You were recommended by a merchant who passed through here last week. He said you did good work. When would you need me to start? 3 weeks. That gives you time to settle your affairs here." Taryn Wells pulled a folded paper from his pocket and held it out. "Details are here. Think on it and send me word." Casper took the paper, his hands numb with shock. "Thank you, I will." When the merchant had gone, Casper unfolded the paper and held it close to his face, squinting at the words. Hessa waited patiently while he read, then asked, "What does it say?" "He is offering steady work at good pay. It is dictation, not reading. I could do that, even if my sight worsens." He lowered the paper, his heart pounding. "It is a chance, Hessa, a real chance. Then you should take it. The village is 2 hours north. I would have to live there or nearby." She said nothing for a long moment. Then carefully, "You could live there alone. Is that what you want?" "No, but I will not assume you want me to come with you." Casper set the paper down and pulled her into his arms. "I want you to come with me. I want to build a life with you if you will have me. I am tired of living alone, and I am tired of hiding what we are to each other. People will talk no matter where we go. Then let them talk. I do not care anymore." He tilted her face up, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I love you, Hessa. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore." She smiled, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I love you too, Casper. I have loved you since you stayed to drink tea with me the night the merchant's daughter found her happy ending. I wanted that for myself, and I wanted it with you." He kissed her then, deep and sure, and she kissed him back with a fierceness that left no doubt about her feelings. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing, giddy with relief and joy. "We will go together," Hessa said. "We will find a cottage near your work, and I will keep house. I can do that, even blind, and you will read to me every night until I fall asleep." "Every night," he promised. They spent the next 3 weeks preparing to leave. Hessa sold what furniture she could and packed the rest. Casper closed out his business in the village, returning documents and settling accounts. The mayor's wife sniffed when she saw him, but the mayor himself shook his hand and wished him well, quietly admitting he thought the village would be poorer for his leaving. On their last evening in the cottage, Casper read to Hessa from a new book, a story about a woman who sailed around the world collecting songs. She fell asleep before the end, her head on his shoulder, and he sat for a long time just holding her, grateful beyond measure for the strange path that had brought them together. They traveled north in a hired cart, their belongings packed around them. The new village was larger than the old, bustling with trade, and no one looked twice at an orc woman and a scarred man unloading furniture from a cart. Taryn Wells met them at the merchant house and showed them to a small cottage on the edge of his property, 2 rooms and a kitchen, modest but clean. "It comes with the position," Taryn said, "if it suits you." "It suits us well," Casper said, and Hessa nodded, her hand finding his. They moved in that day, arranging furniture by trial and error, Hessa directing him to place things where she could find them easily. That night they cooked their first meal together in the new kitchen, a simple soup that tasted like celebration. Afterward, Casper read to her from the book about the song collector, and when she fell asleep in the bed they now shared, he lay beside her, watching the way the moonlight fell across her face. The work at the merchant house was as Taryn had promised. Casper spent his days taking dictation from merchants, writing down inventories and orders and contracts. His hand was steady even when his eyes were not, and he learned to write by feel as much as by sight. Taryn never commented on the way Casper held papers close or asked for things to be repeated. He simply gave clear instructions and trusted Casper to follow them. Hessa, meanwhile, transformed the cottage into a home. She planted herbs in the garden, mended curtains, and began baking bread to sell to the other workers on the property. People bought it readily, and soon she had a small but steady income of her own. She was proud of that, Casper could tell, proud to be contributing in a way that had nothing to do with pity or charity. One evening, 6 months after they had moved, Casper came home to find Hessa in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. She had been planting something. He could see the small mounds of earth in a neat row. He sat down beside her and she turned her head toward him with a smile. "How was your day?" she asked. "Good. Busy. Taryn says I am the best scribe he has ever had. Of course you are." She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of dirt. "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About what we are to each other." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "We live together, we work together, we share a bed, but we have never spoken about making it official." Casper's heart began to beat faster. "Official? Married. I want to marry you, Casper, if you want the same." He had not let himself think about marriage, had assumed it was too much to hope for, but now that she had said it, he realized it was exactly what he wanted. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, I want that." Hessa smiled, bright and joyful. "Then we should do it properly, with vows and witnesses and a proper ceremony. We will need someone to officiate. Taryn knows a priestess who serves the goddess of travelers." "I asked him, just in case you said yes." Casper laughed, pulling her into his arms. "You were very certain of me." "I was certain of us." They were married 3 weeks later in the garden of the cottage, with Taryn and a handful of workers as witnesses. The priestess spoke the vows in a clear voice, and Casper and Hessa repeated them, their hands clasped together. The vows were traditional, promising love and loyalty and partnership, but Casper added his own words at the end, words he had spent days crafting. "I vow to read to you every night until you sleep, and to stay when you ask me to stay. I vow to see you with more than my eyes, to know you with more than my sight. I vow to build a life with you that is full of words and warmth and all the small joys we can find together." Hessa's vow was simpler. "I vow to teach you the world I know, the one shaped by sound and touch and memory. I vow to be your partner in all things, to share your burdens and your happiness. I vow to love you as you are, scars and all." The priestess pronounced them married, and they kissed while the witnesses clapped. It was a small ceremony, humble and sweet, and it felt exactly right. That night Casper read to her from a new book, a gift from Taryn, a collection of love poems from across the kingdoms. Hessa listened with her head on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his shirt. When he finished the last poem, she did not ask him to stay. She did not need to. He was already home. The months turned into a year and then another. Casper's sight continued to decline, but slowly, and with Hessa's help he adapted. She taught him to organize his workspace so he could find things without looking, to use texture and weight to identify documents, to trust his memory more than his eyes. His work at the merchant house flourished, Taryn increasingly relying on him not just for dictation, but for advice and planning. Hessa's baking business grew as well. She hired a local girl to help her knead dough and carry loaves to market, and soon she was supplying bread to half the village. People came to know her not as the blind orc woman, but as the baker with the best rye bread in the region. She was proud of that, and Casper was proud of her. They fell into a rhythm, a life built on small routines and steady affection. Every morning, Casper kissed her goodbye before leaving for the merchant house. Every evening he came home to the smell of bread and the sound of her singing. Every night he read to her until she fell asleep, his voice weaving stories into the darkness. One winter evening, 2 years after their marriage, Casper came home to find Hessa sitting by the fire, a letter in her hands. She held it out to him as he entered, her face unreadable. "This came today," she said. "It is from your father." Casper took the letter, his stomach twisting. He had not heard from his father since he left the university, had assumed the man wanted nothing to do with him. He held the letter close, squinting at the handwriting, then sighed and handed it back to Hessa. "I cannot read it. The script is too small and the light is too dim." "Will you ask me what it says?" "He says he heard you married an orc woman. Someone from the old village wrote to him, apparently." Hessa's voice was carefully neutral. "He says he was shocked at first, but he has been thinking about it. He says he was wrong to cut you off, and he wants to meet your wife." Casper sat down heavily. "He wants to meet you." "Yes. What do you think?" "I think it is your decision." Hessa folded the letter carefully. "But I will tell you what I feel. I feel that he hurt you badly, and that he does not deserve forgiveness just because he has decided to grant it. But I also feel that you have missed him, and that you might regret it if you do not give him a chance." "I have missed him," Casper admitted. "But I am angry too. He abandoned me when I needed him most." "Then tell him that. Let him know the cost of what he did, and then decide if you want him in our life." Casper wrote back that night, a short letter that said everything he had held inside for years. He told his father about the pain of being abandoned, the shame he had carried, the years of struggling alone. And then he told him about Hessa, about the life they had built, about the happiness he had found in spite of everything. He ended the letter with an invitation. His father could visit if he wished, but only if he was prepared to treat Hessa with the respect she deserved. 2 months later his father arrived, older and grayer than Casper remembered, his face lined with regret. He shook Casper's hand, his grip uncertain, and then turned to Hessa and bowed. "Mrs. Davenport," he said quietly, "thank you for agreeing to see me." "You are welcome in our home," Hessa said, and if her voice was cool, it was not unkind. They spent 3 days together, awkward at first, then gradually easier. Casper's father apologized again and again, his words halting and sincere. He spoke about his own fear when Casper was injured, his shame at not being able to protect his son, his cowardice in cutting him off rather than facing his own failure. He asked about their life, their work, their marriage, and he listened to the answers with the kind of attention that Casper had not seen from him in years. On the last evening of the visit, Casper's father sat with them after dinner, watching as Casper read to Hessa from a book of fables. When the reading was done, he cleared his throat. "I see now that you have built something I never managed," he said. "A partnership based on honesty and respect. I am proud of you, Casper. I should have said that years ago." Casper felt tears prick his eyes. "Thank you." "And Hessa, I am grateful to you for loving my son. He deserves that and more." Hessa inclined her head. "He does." When Casper's father left the next morning, he embraced them both, and Casper felt a weight lift that he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. The past was not erased, but it was no longer a wound. It was simply part of the story, one thread among many. The years continued to pass, measured in seasons and stories. Casper's sight worsened, as he had known it would, but it happened slowly enough that he had time to adjust. By the 5th year of their marriage, he could no longer read at all, not even large print in good light. But by then, Hessa had learned to read, painstakingly teaching herself through a set of raised letter books Taryn had found for her. She traced the letters with her fingers, sounding out words until she could piece together sentences, and then paragraphs, and finally whole pages. One night she took the book from Casper's hands and said, "Let me read to you tonight." He listened as she read, her voice slow and careful, shaping each word with the same precision she brought to everything. It was not as smooth as his reading had been, but it was beautiful in its own way, a gift given with love. When she finished the chapter, she set the book aside and reached for his hand. "We have traded places," she said. "Now I read to you until you sleep. And will you stay when I ask you to stay, always?" They sat together in the firelight, two people who had found each other in the darkness and learned to build a life by touch and sound and trust. They had their work, their home, their small joys. They had each other, and that was enough. On their 7th anniversary, Hessa surprised him with a gift, a book bound in soft leather and filled with blank pages. "For your stories," she said. "You should write down the ones you tell me at night, the ones you make up when the books run out. I cannot write any more. My hand shakes too much, and I cannot see the page. Then tell them to me, and I will write them down. We will make the book together." So they did, Casper dictating stories while Hessa carefully wrote them in her raised letter script. The stories were simple at first, tales of talking animals and clever farmers, but gradually they grew more complex, full of the observations and truths they had learned together. When the book was full, Taryn helped them print copies, and Hessa sold them at the market along with her bread. They sold better than either of them expected, and soon people were asking for more. "You are an author now," Hessa teased one evening as she counted the coins from the day's sales. "We are authors," Casper corrected. "You write them down, you sell them, you manage the business. I only provide the words. The words are everything." "No," he said, pulling her close. "The words are part of it, but the life we have built together, that is everything." They sat together as the fire burned low, Casper's arms around Hessa, her head on his shoulder. Outside the wind howled, but inside the cottage was warm and full of the scent of bread and ink and home. They had both lost so much, sight and family, and the futures they had once imagined. But they had found something better, a partnership that did not depend on what they could see, but on what they could feel and hear and touch. They had found each other, and that was worth more than all the sight in the world. "Read to me," Hessa said softly. "One of our stories. I want to hear it in your voice." So Casper recited from memory, the story of a woman who could not see and a man who was learning not to, and how they built a life together from words and patience and love. Hessa listened with her eyes closed, a smile on her lips, and when the story was done she kissed him and whispered, "Stay." "Always," he said. And he did, for all the years they had together, reading and being read to, speaking and listening, two people who had learned to see with their hearts instead of their eyes. They lived simply and well, and when they were old and gray they still sat by the fire every evening, telling stories and holding hands, grateful for the chance meeting that had given them everything they needed. Their cottage became known in the village, the place where the blind baker and her half-blind husband lived, the couple who made books and bread and had somehow built a marriage that weathered every storm. Young couples came to them for advice, and Casper and Hessa told them the truth. That love was not about perfection, but about accepting each other's flaws and building something strong from what remained. On a spring evening in their 20th year together, Casper and Hessa sat in their garden, now lush with herbs and flowers that Hessa tended by touch and smell. They were older now, their hair streaked with gray, their hands marked by years of work. But they were happy, content in the life they had made. "You remember the night we met?" Hessa asked, her hand in his. "You asked me to read to you until you slept. And you did. Every night for weeks until I asked you to stay. Best decision I ever made." Hessa laughed, the sound warm and full. "The best decision we ever made, choosing each other when everyone said we should not. Would you choose differently if you could go back?" "Never." She squeezed his hand. "Would you? Not for anything in this world or the next." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Casper could no longer see and Hessa had never seen. But they did not need to see it. They knew it was beautiful because they could feel the warmth on their skin, hear the birds singing their evening songs, smell the flowers opening in the cool air. They knew beauty came in many forms, and the truest form was sitting beside someone you loved and knowing you were home. That night, Casper read to her from one of their own books, a story they had written together about two people who found each other in the dark. Hessa fell asleep with her head on his shoulder, her breathing deep and even, and Casper held her close and thought about all the nights they had shared, all the words they had spoken, all the ways they had built a life from nothing but patience and hope. He thought about the young man he had been, ashamed and afraid, convinced his life was over. He thought about the woman who had asked him to read, who had seen past his scars to the person underneath. He thought about all the small moments that had brought them here, the injured bird, the cup of mint tea, the first kiss in the garden. Each moment a thread, woven together into something strong and bright. "Thank you," he whispered to the sleeping woman in his arms, "for asking me to stay." Hessa stirred slightly, a small smile on her lips, and Casper knew that wherever the future led them, they would face it together. They had built something that could not be broken by blindness or prejudice or time. They had built a love that saw with the heart, that spoke in whispers and laughter and the steady rhythm of pages turning in the night. And that was more than enough. It was everything.